Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture. And before I introduce my guest, I do want to bring a few things to people's attentions. There's some links up above. There's obviously a Kickstarter link up there. So if you like what you hear in this interview, and we're going to be talking about the project, obviously I want you to go click that Kickstarter link, back it, whether it's digital or anything else like that. You know, physical, digital, special, black and white edition, color edition. Every dollar helps, as well as there's a Buy Me a Coffee. This show, as of right now, is fan supported, so consider that also. If you like what you hear here, do that as well. And also, I would just like to say before that I did put up super short notice. One of my guests had an emergency, and so obviously my guest Shane Berryhill stepped up, and so I am super thankful for you actually stepping up. So welcome to the show.
Hey, Andrew, pleasure to be here tonight, man. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for all you do, man, for comics, for pop culture, just for entertainment, and spreading the good word on all this and providing this platform for us, buddy. Big props to you.
Well, now we can all go home now. Now that we've accomplished that, we can all go home. But no, in seriousness, you have a Kickstarter going on right now called Jason and the Olympians, which is a 64-page graphic novel. And obviously it's being kickstarted, and I think the book is already done. It's just a matter of funding it and printing it and getting it into the right hands. And so before we get too much into it, I am curious, what is the basic premise of it? Because we're going to talk about it.
All right. Well, man, you did a good pitch for me there. The title of the book is Jason and the Olympians. Imagine a world where the gods of Greek myth actually existed. And not only did they exist in the past, continue to exist in the present day, and then 100 years basically into our future. Well, the titans of myth return, wipe them out and humanity, and reveal, basically the titans reveal the dark alien menace behind their legend. So the last of humanity escape in a space ark, the Starship Olympia. And it's up to young teenage prodigy Jason Mukai and her demigoddess friends to combine their robot colossi into the protector of the Olympia, the giant automaton Talos, and thwart the alien menace of the Titans. Humanity's last hope, Andrew, is Jason and the Olympians.
And so I'm super stoked because for those who know me, I'm a huge anime. I love Robotech. I love Gundam. And obviously this is right in it. You know, I have a friend, Nate Milbank, and he's a big mecha fan. And so obviously I am super curious how all this came about and the inspiration for it, because it's very much a classic story of humanity facing an external threat, but you've added certain gods in there, and obviously a mecha component and an element of, you know, not to go biblical, but Noah's Ark and, you know, survival in there. And so where did all of this come from? Because you're combining a lot of cool stuff and adding a new, you know, layer and some fresh new coats of paint and some new ideas in there as well.
Right, man. And I'll be the first one to admit, in many ways, there are no new stories, just new ways of telling old ones. And you nailed it. I grew up loving giant mech cartoons, you know, and then now in my current age, I love, you know, Nickelodeon's Avatar cartoon, The Legend of Korra, just fans of that, and Star Wars and all this cool stuff. Is what was the genesis of Jason and the Olympians. And it was the seed of an idea. My co-creator on the project, he's our graphic designer, letterer, co-creator, Alex Ogle, who, big props to that guy. He's an artist as well. He actually has a variant cover for The Amazing Spider-Man coming out in October. So look for that, everybody. But Alex, at the time we started talking, and she's still in middle school, had a young daughter. And I thought, well, what is a book that takes these things I love and that we could put them together in a book that Alex and his daughter, or me and my own son, could read, and both of us enjoy it equally. And so, you know, and then just these two unlikely bedfellows of ancient god and goddesses, you know, I wanted to take that premise, that classic epic feel, and just knock the dust off of it and put it in a space age setting with all these cool giant robots, aliens, and just have fun. It is unabashedly a big blockbuster, epic, popcorn, fun, lighthearted book, that comic that I think fans of all of the above are going to love, in all humility.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, I love it, and I've read a preview copy of it, and obviously, I think I've read the first. I think there's 4 chapters in
That's
the
correct.
64-pager, and so it's very cool to that degree where we got sort of 4 acts going on, or 4 episodes, and it's really just a fun comic to read. And so I kind of want to dive into some of this, though, because obviously
Let's
there's
talk,
a lot.
buddy. Let's talk.
And so, obviously, first and foremost, we are dealing with an external threat that has attacked Earth. And these creatures / alien entities are the Titans. And obviously, for those who know, Greek mythology, the Titans obviously sided with one side of the gods, and now they've wiped out humanity. And then, well, where did that idea for the Titans come about? And the Titans are sort of robotic, but they're not robotic to some degree, and they're almost mecha-like, but they're God-infused, and it's very interesting. So what exactly are the Titans, and where did that idea come from? Because there is some cool stuff going on with this, and as the book goes on, we find out some very interesting things about the Titans.
Yeah. Man, I'm glad you're pumped for it. I thank you on behalf of myself and the rest of the team, Jason. Well, again, the mythology is just kind of laid out itself. Like I said, I was always a big fan of, giant robot cartoons, kaiju, Godzilla. I just grew up on all that stuff. And, and also on the other hand, a big fan of mythology, and pretty well versed in Greek mythology, which, there was a war in ancient history in the myth. They call it the gigantomachy, or the giant war, basically, in prehistory. And I thought, well, what if we put that in a space age setting? If it happens again, there's World War I. What if this is giant World War II? And but then when you've got these big popcorn ideas, it's like, well, I've got to ground that in relationships and characters as well. So early on, we're admittedly playing on themes of mother-daughter, Jason and her mother, Captain Diana, who's a starfighter pilot, just right out of the gate, And I think as a storyteller, and you've got to grab the reader by the throat, begin with, and just keep them turning pages. That's my job, So there was an answer there somewhere, but I just thought these things were cool. Now, if you get into that, you find the Titans themselves are a race of alien giants, but they're only, maybe 10 foot tall or something around this, but they've constructed these giant chimera, which what are chimera in ancient mythology? They're a mishmash of creatures. Well, what's the alien space age version? You've got cybernetic cyclopses and chimera and just all kinds of things we'll play with through Greek mythology, man. But again, nobody's going to care about that stuff if they don't first care about the characters, the relationships, if they're having fun.
And then obviously the reason why I bring up the enemy first is where we go, and now we're entering the other side, and we have Jason, and basically Jason, she is a very interesting individual, and there's a lot going on where obviously her mom was an amazing fighter pilot who wound up basically sacrificing herself to allow the ship to escape. I know I'm ruining some of it.
But man, spoil away. Let's do it.
I'm not going to ruin everything, I promise.
Then
apparently she wound up got on this ship, the ship takes off, run away from the Titans, and then obviously she's in foster care, and she disappears inside a city ship for like 3 years in public view, and then, well, she's found, and then, well, now she's sort of being solicited by, I guess, the government of the ship to figure out this entire, I guess, answer against the Titans, which are the Colossi. Meanwhile, also, Jason has a huge history where I think her father was very much involved in the Starship Olympia, and her grandfather co-engineered it. So what is this like to really build out her character? Because it's almost within her blood to be part of the answer and to be, I guess, the last opposition to actually bring an offensive position against the Titans. And we're going to talk about a little bit more of this as we go on. I have, again, there's so much to unpack, but even to build something like this, because there's a lot of richness to her character, and there's a lot of things to play off of, but also there's real pressure that she's feeling because she has a legacy name.
Mm-hmm. You've hit the nail on the head, Andrew. There's a lot more. As impressive as Jason is out of the gate, there's a lot more to her past still yet to be revealed. As you alluded to, not only is she the daughter of a famous starfighter pilot, she's the granddaughter of Professor Haruki Mukai, who is the co-architect of the Starship Olympia and more. And you get more about him and his backstory and others during these little interludes we have between chapters. We don't want to dump exposition on the reader, but we did fun things like, e-diaries, and there's a robot Centauron called Chiron, who in Greek myth was trained the demigod heroes, but we have him kind of as a PR manager. So he's kind of got like a Dear Abby section where he tells about Jason and the Olympians. But anyway, back to Jason herself. So yeah, she's got a lot to live up to, and more than anybody knows. As you alluded to, she disappears upon the Starship Olympia for 3 years. Well, fun fact, big reveal here, and we kind of talk. You don't see it here, but in my mind, in her backstory, she's running around on the lower decks, which would be like the slums of the Starship Olympia, with these blader gangs, and so there's just so much. What you get, the first graphic novel is admittedly a big setup. It sets up the world, the characters, the relationships, the conflict. It's the canvas, but it's just the tip of the iceberg, man. There is so much story still below the level, and just fun.
And even to go further into this, because obviously she's now hanging out, obviously sort of what you imagine in the slums, and sort of just being a civilian and hiding in plain sight, which is really crazy because obviously this starship is watching every citizen, more or less. And so obviously she has real skills to hide. And then fast forward, now she's brought into the military and she's almost being retrained into combat and all that. And now she's being trained essentially to, pilot one of these colossi, which we're going to talk about also.
Right.
But also she's being trained as a politician at the same time, and very much like a military officer. And obviously I spent time in D.C. I worked for some veteran organizations. Awesome. What winds up happening is that if you want to be promoted in the military to colonel or general, you actually have to spend time both in congressional offices as, LDs and defense LDs or LAs, and also in the Pentagon. And so you have all these people, and like I was speaking to a bunch of people who are become colonels and generals, and they're spending time in D.C. on Capitol Hill. And so that's very much what she's being like. And so what was that like? Because that's a whole nother development of her character that we're seeing her getting developed into this, and how she's going and giving public support and morals when really the entire thing is a disaster of them fighting the Titans, and all this and there's all this political stuff going on too. And so it's very interesting when you now see the other side, where it's not just a war-hungry soldier being trained, but it's also political, ideology being pushed forth in a political symbol, which is what she's becoming at the same time. And that's what's so interesting about this comic.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, we set up the world in this first graphic novel. And man, you're picking up on these cues. Thank you. It makes me feel good. We've done our jobs. It's humanity. But what tends to happen when you're faced a existential threat, if in many ways, as the pandemic has showed us, it's kind of like you have to circle the wagons, and a lot of times personal liberties go out the window. And I'm not for or against or saying anything like that. I'm just, historically speaking, it's like, hey, when a wartime setting, we've got to buckle down, and it's all for one and one for all. And that's kind of the environment Jason has found herself in. And, you know, she's plucky though. She's a go-getter. She doesn't take no, and they want her help because, like we said, she's a genius. She's the granddaughter of the architect of the Olympia, and they figure, you know, her smarts can help them because at the beginning of the book, some of the colossi are missing, and they need help locating that. They need help trying to make them work, and so that's how Jason comes in. But Jason, being Jason, says, well, I'll do that for you if you'll do this for me. And she wants to actually pilot one. She wants to fight and learn to fight and train to be a pilot. And because you in the first Gigantomachy, it was of old in this world, the colossi are, you know, they're ancient automaton weapons. And the first giant war against the Titans, they were piloted by Hercules, Perseus, other demigods. So what Jason does, she wants to be a part of the team of Project Demigoddess, where they've taken the DNA of those old heroes and cloned them all into young female warriors. And so instead of Hercules, you've got Herculea. Instead of Theseus, you have Thessaly, and so on and so forth. So she maneuvers there. But then also, how you've alluded, they use Jason and her assistance as basically propaganda to just keep the morale of the ship up, because, you know, Earth's literally wiped out. So it's not a fun, although the book is lighthearted, you know, it's not necessarily a bright time in human history.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff going on where obviously the book has some fun, you know, things in there, and it's got, you know, really flashy art, and there's some funny moments in there, and obviously there's stuff going on with her and the senator and all that stuff. And that's like a nice little cute scene where, you know, we're reminded that she is a young woman still, and that she still has to be flirted with to some degree. And yeah, she appreciates a compliment, and she appreciates, you know, I guess chivalry for lack of a better word here. And then how, you know, also the senator is very encouraging of her. And I'm assuming, you know, he might be into her a little bit romantically, and we're going to see where that goes. Or, you know, he just might be a brilliant leader and he knows how to encourage humanity's, you know, last driving force, so that he can not be a senator anymore, be something higher up for all we know. But, you know, hey, guys have ambitions. That's all I'm going to say. So, I mean, we all want to be better. But anyhow, it's very interesting because she's doing that, and then even going further, obviously, there's all sorts of stuff with the Colossi and all that stuff happening too. And it's dark to the point where they have a bunch of them, but they don't know how to use them, and they know they have the tool against the Titans and to bring an offensive position and not a defensive position. Yet they're missing one of them. And now what is that like? And they also don't know how to crack the codes on them. And it's very, very dark when you have the answer, but you're like 4 or 5 steps away from the answer to what can basically change the entire perspective of a situation and a war. And you don't have it. And it creates a very interesting thing. And then also finding sort of the last 1 or 2 of them. And so that's something that's super interesting that this book deals with.
Yeah. They need a breakthrough, a technological breakthrough, a miracle per se. And if I can sidebar on you a minute, you mentioned the great art. Speaking of miracles, the artist, Mattia Monaco, man, his art, in all humility, guys, it is fantastic. It is going to blow your mind. It's very, he's an Italian artist. He and I have never actually met, but his sensibilities are very manga, very Mobius, very European. I cannot thank him enough for what he did for the book. And then on top of that, you've got the colorist, Maya Opasic, who, I mean, I think your preview, Andrew, is mostly black and white, but man, she is just
like half and half.
Yeah. She's just, I mean, well, you know, it's obviously progressed. We set that aside to send out, you know, to you and company. But I mean, she has the full Technicolor boom coming down. You know, it's a beautiful book. I promise you, your listeners, your watchers. But yeah, they need that breakthrough. They need hope. In other words, they need hope. They need a miracle. and that gets into, and it happens in real life even sometimes. That's what heroes do. They do the impossible, and we can all use a little bit of that. I know, um, but that all kind of works for us in the real world as an allegory. It's a never saying die, never giving up, and moving on.
And then obviously even going into this, because this is where what I like is that it's very much a mecha-oriented book. And so that's kind of my background. I have Mecha in my Facebook name for a reason.
Yeah.
People who know.
We made this book for you, Andrew. I'm not kidding, man. For you.
And so obviously it's an inside joke among a bunch of my friends. And one of the things that is that these are weird mechas where they're not traditional. They're not, the humanoid. It's not, Super Sentai mecha. It's obviously more, animal based and almost more Zoid based for those who know what Zoids are. But also, obviously, they do have, ancient gods, ancient Egypt ties to them, ancient Greece ties to them, and things like that. And so always this, like even developing that style and finding, and also where one of the last ones is found is also very much on a planet that is that. And that vibes. And so what was this like really building out a certain style of mecha versus going the traditional humanoid form?
Well, that kind of, we wanted to use, it is creatures from Greek mythology. And again, my co-creator, Alex, we worked together on designs and then brought Maddie in as well. The Colossus that Jason ultimately pilots is a Sphinx. Everybody knows the Egyptian Sphinx, but there's actually a Grecian Sphinx. That's where the riddle of the Sphinx comes from, per se. And then you've got the Hercules Colossus. That's the Nemean, which is based on the Nemean lion, or Nemean rather, lion from Greek myth. And Thessaline, her Colossus is the Minotaur, and based from Theseus. And then you've got the Griffin, which is Colossus, which is actually a Grecian Colossus, Grecian creature as well from myth. And then rounding it out, finally, is the Pegasus, the one everybody knows, the winged horse Colossus, which again, all of those together form that awesome sauce, the giant automaton Talos, which again is straight out of Greek myth, the bronze automaton, which Jason and the Argonauts faced. And admittedly, that kind of is the springboard for Jason and the Olympians.
And then even talking about this, because we're taking a step of, we're going into one step ahead where we should be, because obviously one of the fun things about this book that also I feel counters the darkness is that the breakthrough through this is with these cute little almost empathetic creatures. And I know I'm ruining certain things, but I don't think I'm ruining
Go for it, man. Let's spoil it.
I'm not going to ruin the 4th chapter because that changes the game completely. Something big happens in the 4th chapter. We're still in the 3rd. And so one of the things that's sort of fun is that it's taking this cute little empathetic creature that sort of harnesses and almost acts like a conductor for a link between, these demigods and the colossi, and actually makes it sort of very pilotable. And it's very cool when you have these little tiny creatures off of this planet that are helping to do this, because it reminds and it brings it back down into, I guess, more from a mature rated book down to like PG-13 a little bit, and also lightens up the mood a little bit. And so what was that like? Because it's very tactful to sort of throw that into there, whether it was intentional or not, or really just helps the pacing out tremendously.
No, again, in many ways, this is a love letter to the cartoons, the anime, the mech shows that you're talking about. And, they're from Pokemon to Digimon to Voltron Mouse to everything. This is a nod to that. But what bothered me is, growing up for me, in all honesty, the cutesy creatures, they were never my favorite part of the show, if you will, because they just were there simply to be cute in many respects. But for Jason and Olympians, so I wanted them to have a purpose, to have function, to be more than just, something to pet, if you will. And so, as you've already alluded to, man, what and we call our creatures, they're nereids, which again in Greek Greek myth are these little impish creatures. And so what they do, they have empathic abilities. So they're able to serve between humans, the colossi pilots, and the automaton colossi, which are, living AI, artificial intelligence, sophisticated enough, and that they needed an interface. And so our Nereids, our cutesy little creatures, which I dig in this respect, I dig a lot, act as that interface.
And then obviously this sort of helps to eventually lead into the formation of Talos, because all 5 of these robots, or there might even be, I think there's 5, right?
There is 5. There are 5.
I'm just making sure I counted correctly. Sometimes in black and white, this could look weird. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
And so obviously they then form Talos, which is this giant robot, very much a Voltron moment type thing, and very much Power Rangers as well. And so what was this like, having the ability for them to be 5 separate chips, but also form something, be right next to this super high-tech, awesome massive city-built ship type thing, and now actually have the ability to fight the Titans and fight those mecha robot cybernetic Titans, and even forcing the Titans to retreat, which is a very cool moment.
Well, I mean, it's the fun that entire book builds to. And again, Jason and the Olympians, as we said, is a very much a love letter to not only Voltron, but the Supergiant robot cartoons where he formed ships from Mazinger Z and beyond, back even before him, from the 70s and beyond. There's a long legacy of this, and we wanted to be a new twist on that legacy. And you've got. And the twist for us, the new twist, it's an the all-female lead cast. There are competent, capable males in the series. One of my favorite is this anti-hero / vigilante. Is he a villain? Is he a hero? Damon Child, which is teased during this first arc. Not emasculating males in any way, shape, or the form, but at the same time, really wanted to empower females and put them in, the roles that typically, and power. It's a love letter to Power Rangers. You mentioned it, but and the formula was always, almost made females token, but no. And Jason and the Olympians, they are the stars. They get to shine. And they get to fulfill their destiny as this, and the power, just purely female power in Talos that just brings down the Titans, and just makes for an awesome, fun time.
And then obviously, I'm skipping a certain thing that happens because it is a major spoiler.
Yeah, on that one now. On that one.
And so obviously, though, something happens that sort of changes the game. And we also do get to see what the Titans look like, where the Titans just aren't, and I think it's safe to say, you mentioned it briefly, where they are humans to some degree, where they have human attributes.
Humanoid, yeah.
In which that, they're not, the Titans isn't just like a Cyclops, cybernetic thing. There's something inside of that doing it. Very much like the Zentrani, and them piloting their units from Robotech is a really good way to put it. And so obviously there is a lot of stuff that has to be discussed, and there's a whole bunch of history of what are the Titans exactly, who are the Titans, if the Titans exist, is there something else out there, why did they attack Earth, what exactly did this ship engineering come out of. And so there's a lot of stuff that's not answered in the first 464 pages. And so I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this is not just a one-shot graphic novel. There's clearly going to be, issue 5, 6, 7, 8, and then so on and so forth. And what can people expect? Because sometimes you don't need an answer to some of these questions, but sometimes you do need an answer, or sometimes, this is going to be sprinkled in a variety of other ways. And so obviously, where's all this going? Because this is sort of just setting up the placemat. But really, they haven't dealt with any major conflict at the moment. I mean, this is not the super big, conflict. This is just the beginning of what's about to go down.
Right. You're absolutely right, Jason. I mean, again, this sets up just the main conflict and the characters in the world. Going forward, we definitely would explore that. I mean, like I told you when we started the podcast, that the Titans return to Earth and wipe out the gods. Well, why did they do that? Um, I mean, you can look at Greek myth to get some teasers, but often in world and history period, history is written by the victors. And right now, the Titans are perceived as the bad guys, the enemies of God and of gods and humanity. Is that truly the case, or is that just a narrative that the gods put down to humanity all this time? So, a lot of questions to be answered, a lot of conflicts to be explored. And if, as you alluded, we are currently running the Kickstarter. As of today, we are a third of the way to our goal. As you said, we're just trying to get the book is done. We're just trying to get printing and shipping costs. So if your listeners and watchers would be kind enough to go to jason.info, and that's Jason, JACIN.info, and back us and help us spread the word, man, we would love to continue the adventures of Jason. Now, where we answer those questions, and the next arc I've already written in full.
We're gonna talk about rewards and all sorts of stuff. I promise you. Which there's a lot more we're gonna talk about. So obviously, I mean, you can continue. Sorry for interrupting. So what's going on with the next arc? Because you're gonna tease something.
No, I was just saying that because the first graphic novel is a setup. What I do is kind of streamline the characters in the second arc, and without sacrificing the fun and excitement and action. But we really start to dig in more to Jason and her relationships, and then there's actually a backstory, like you mentioned. This first graphic novel is 4 chapters. Well, I think our formula going forward would be 3 chapters basically featuring Jason, and then we'll have a backup chapter featuring another character. And in the backup chapter, which allows us to explore those characters in the second arc, is on the demigoddess Thessaline, who is blind, but she's an oracle. And in Greek myth, they were the clairvoyants. But in this world, I've set up our oracles, basically a sisterhood of clairvoyant ninjas. So get to look into that aspect, and then the big threat, the big baddie to come, is alluded to. So again, I hope we made our goals. I hope help so that I get to tell those stories. I'm dying to continue to play in this sandbox. There's so much story, so much fun yet to be had.
And then obviously there's a bunch of rewards. And so we're going to go through some of this. And there's a few rewards, I should say. And so obviously there's the digital stuff, which is, the cheapest. There's a digital black and white just edition. There's the full color. You can get both versions in a bundle pack. And so that's just the digital side of stuff. And then going even further, there's obviously, the print, physical copy in color. And this is also what it looks like. There's the black and white out there, and so that's some of that there. So that's a reward. And then this is just some art that I wanted to show, just to show what this book looks like a little bit. And obviously this is just some art right there. And so obviously, you could get, the book, and then there's just a bunch of other stuff where I think there's some packs, and then there's the collector's level that has some prints in there and a variety of stuff. Probably the collector's pack better than I do, at least. It's a very big, substantial pack of a bunch of stuff relating to this, and then obviously the books and that stuff. And so what is that like? Because obviously some people are big fans of this type of genre and are big space fans or mecha fans, and they want all the goodies that you can't get when you bring it to a con, for instance.
Right. Well, as you said, the book will be available in both color and in black and white. It just depends on or bundles of the two. It depends on what level. And of course, the lowest level, you can enjoy the full complete story in black and white for as little as $5. And then for a mere $3 more, you get the color PDF. And then the levels just continue up to what you've mentioned, a collector's level. where you get the black and white graphic novel, the colorful graphic novel printed, the PDFs of the digital versions. You also get these actual blueprint schematics of the cross sections of Talos the automaton and the Cyclops, which is his nemesis, the giant Cyclops, cybernetic Cyclops he fights in this first book. And again, those are produced by Madia and drawing them, and Alex putting them in blueprint form, and they're phenomenal. I mean, I really geeked, talk about mechs and Godzilla. I used to love those cross section posters where, it would show, the innards of whatever mech or mecha Godzilla you had. Well, this is that thing in beautiful rendered fashion. Now, on top of that, it doesn't matter if you get that high collector level or the earliest black and white PDF at any level. We actually have T-shirts with these awesome Jason the Olympian graphics on them that can be add-on at any level. So it's just a fun, good time. A lot of good merch, and which I can't wait to support myself.
And then also you also offer retail packages, which is obviously I'm entering that segment and I'm getting into that business. I run an eBay store and I buy and sell comics, and it's become very interesting with indie and what stores are doing. And obviously there's been a lot of stuff where it's being tested extensively, where some stores do very well with it, some stores don't. But even offering an indie level package, because at this stage, indie is much bigger than it was 5 years ago. And it's also more mainstream. And things are appearing, and well, you never know what indie title is going to hit. And so what is this like offering a retail pack? Because there's some Kickstarters that don't offer that at all. And obviously I'm very new to this, so I can't really speak on expertise, even though my background as in comics is not from the writing standpoint, it's from the comic book investing side. Obviously I'm about to find out about indie, and I'm sort of going on this journey, and I'm at the infancy of that. But what is this like to also offer a package for shops? Because, well, Kickstarters go fly by the waist by some people, and well, certain shops say, hey, look, I want a different thing inside my shop. Mm-hmm. And this is what you're offering. And it's important for I think, books to get into comic shops.
Absolutely. We love our comic shops. I mean, we've got a few great ones in the area. Infinity Flux, which is kind of how Alex and I met. Another one, Epicos Run. I mean, we love comics retailers. Some of my, and so we offer a package because they are our lifeblood. The customer, yes, but often our customers can't get it unless, comic shops carry it. And I know that's predominantly done through Diamond, but for that comic retailer out there that's listening, that's hearing what we're talking about and knowing it's cool and just digging on it, for you, and we appreciate you. We've got a bundle of the books, I believe it's 10, at a drastically reduced price combined, so that you can get it out. It'll be something new and fresh. Something I bet you have parents coming into your store all the time asking, well, what can I read with my kids? And this book is that. Again, it's the genesis for it was, what's a book?
I know plenty of stores. So I'm an online store, which is
nice.
A whole different thing. And I deal with high-end collectibles versus regular books. So I deal with variants almost exclusively. But the idea of what's actually going on in the comic world is that a bunch of kids are coming in saying, hey, I don't know what I can read now. And that, parents and even grandparents say, hey, this looks cool. My kid wants to come in here and they want a friendly book, and my kid's 12, and I don't want to give him an image book so quickly. As much as we like him, and Walking Dead is great and Saga is great, you don't want to give your 12-year-old Saga. No offense. I'll give my 16-year-old, if I had a 16-year-old, Saga. I'm not going to let them read Saga, but I'll let them read a book like Robotech or a book like yours, for instance, at 12 or even at 8 years old. I think would be pushing a little bit, but I think it's appropriate. And so that's what's going on a lot with comics right now, is there's a big question about what is appropriate. And while stores are having a really hard time, because I speak to a lot of comic stores, both publicly and privately. And so this is something that's very interesting, not to mention that you also get people like me who are now saying, hey, look, I'm looking to expand, my online side. I'm obviously testing it, with certain books right now. And I'm looking saying, hey, how can I get, a customer? And obviously, I'm going down a wholesale route in a lot of ways. And I'm saying, okay, how can I find, something that a customer is going to appreciate more and what they're looking for, and hit a different market and expand into a new market. And so
Yeah,
it's pretty interesting what's going on with this. And I think it's important to give that option and also make it so that it's profitable for the shop.
100%. Again, shops are our lifeblood. As you alluded to, yeah, what's appropriate? Well, I mean, Jason and the Olympians for me, when I first started writing, and I'll get to it. There we go. It's a little backwards for me. My first foray into writing was prose. I wrote a novel. That's Chance Fortune and the Outlaws. It was a New York Public Library Best Book for Teens, a national Texas Lone Star Reading List selection. And it was aimed at a middle grade audience. The cover art, which is amazing, and I was just super humbled and worked with, is James Jean. So Jason and the Olympians is a return to that fare, that middle grade sci-fi fun adventure story, which the whole family can read together. Again, on the opposite side of that, I'll get it here in a minute. I'm in Sherwood, Texas, which I was lucky enough to publish in comic form through 12 Gauge Comics. And it was the retailers and online sellers like yourself that made the book a success. So thank you so much. Thanks to all of you. And in all humility, take a chance on Jason and the Olympians. You're not going to be let down. It's going to be a fun ride that you can sell to dads and kids and moms and cousins and aunts and uncles and grandma and papa. It's a book for everybody. It is a mainstream book. That is what we wanted to create. I've done dark and gritty. And I'll continue to do it. But I love it. I love the big picture, the big popcorn movie, blockbuster. And I love the small indie film that is full of pathos. And I've tried to take those two bedfellows and put them together in Jason and the Olympians, me and the rest of Team Jason. And in all humility, I think we've done well. And just hope everybody, your watchers, listeners, retailers, everybody, will check it out. Back us on the Kickstarter, Jason, JACIN.info. That's it. And bring it home. Bring it home.
And then obviously there's a lot of stuff going on with this as well. It's also nice because it's a complete story. And that's the other thing where, you're not just getting 24 pages and then you got to wait 3 to 6 months for the next installment. You're getting a pretty substantial amount of content where, you're getting 64 pages and you're getting, essentially 4 issues or around about 4 issues, or what is known now, because a lot of companies are moving to 64 to 72 page, almost like a one-shot type thing, where it's almost like a mini graphic novel. Yeah. It's in between a full graphic novel and beyond a comic for more material. So Zenescope, which I'm a big fan of, is moving a lot to 72 page books, and they're charging $8.99 for it. But you're also getting a huge chunk where you're getting pretty much 3 story arcs in one book. And this is very similar, where you're getting pretty much, obviously this is 4 chapters, but you're getting a big story arc all at once, and you don't have to wait out for it. And there's real advantages to that. And it's also an easier sell to some degree, because I'm like, okay, cool. I don't have to now wait another, 6 to 12 months to do it. And I'm obviously in the next installment, I'm going to get a bigger chunk of it, even more so, and then more so and more so, which helps move the story along faster.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it is a fully complete, story. Yeah, it's a vehicle we hope to continue, but I'm a story guy. So I like to read a story beginning, middle, and end, sink my teeth into it. And not have to wait and be postponed. And as you've already said, Andrew, the book is done. It's done. It's not a question of will you get it, won't you get it. The book is done. We just are trying to get money for printing and shipping. So,
which is how Kickstarter is supposed to be. And so I'm actually very curious about this, because obviously you've been doing this in a lot of different ways with prose and then other comics and other things, where Kickstarter, and then we're about to get controversial slightly, where there's a big issue in my opinion. I'm actually going to be on somebody's show on Friday, and we're probably going to talk about this, where a lot of people I feel are using Kickstarter as a business. And what they're doing is they're saying, hey, you know, I have this book and I want to try to make money on it on Kickstarter. And that my goal now is to pay my artist back and then make a little more. And whatever we do with that money, whether we kick it forward, we have a page rate built in for me as the writer or my artist or something like that. And I feel like it's gotten away from the idea of saying, hey, I'm trying to just get the project funded, which is what I think Kickstarter was intended for. You know, if I'm to run a Kickstarter for this project, the goal legitimately is $500, because I'm not saying I'm going to do it. I'm not saying I'm not going to do it. But legitimately, the goal is just to get this thing another season. And I feel like that's a big problem going on with Kickstarter right now, is a lot of people are saying, I don't want to just get this thing. I'm viewing it as a business and not to get the thing published. And I don't know how you feel about that, because it's great to make money, but I feel that something's amiss with Kickstarter and it's not being used for what it was intended to be used for.
Well, as far as my feelings, I mean, I don't think you should go into any creative endeavor just with your primary goal to make money. I write, I tell stories. I mean, I've tried to quit, Andrew. I have tried, because I can make more money at doing a different job down the road, you know, but I can't. I love it. It keeps me awake at night. It's my passion. Creating worlds, characters.
It keeps you from going miserable and hating your life.
Right.
This show, I'm not making any money right now with this podcast and this kind of thing and conversation. It's not my day job. It's a hobby. It takes a lot of effort, but it keeps me sharp. And when I'm having conversations with people, I'm sharp in conversations. And I know people who make a lot of money and they're not sharp and they're miserable when they come home. Right now, I'm in between jobs. When I was working, I would come home and I'd be excited to do this. I think that's the thing with it. So I'm not looking to make money with this creative thing either, per se. But I don't think there's anything wrong with making money. But I think it's attention.
I'll throw that caveat in there. I mean, I'm going to do it regardless, but I am not against making money in the process, buddy. I mean, because if worst case scenario, if I do make any money, that allows me to make the next passion project I'm excited about.
But the way I feel is that I feel like everybody now is going into Kickstarter to try to make money. And I feel that they don't just, because I feel like it's money starter versus Kickstarter. And again, I know we're getting into controversy, but I feel like everybody's saying, hey, you know, I'm trying to just make some money on it. I just don't want to get the project across the finish line. It's now being treated almost like a business. And I think it's very, very dangerous, because when you start going into that, well, you know, you start viewing it, and there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, my book's a business. You know, this entire process of what I do is run like a business, but it's also a different type of business. It's almost like owning a basketball team. You know, it's like you own the Dallas Mavericks. You know, that type of business is very different than, you know, running your local deli. And Kickstarter is probably more like running the Dallas Mavericks than it is running your local deli.
Maybe. And I'll be honest with you, Andrew. I can't judge anybody else, their endeavors. I don't think it's my place to do so. I mean, I can only speak for me, and with Kickstarter, with Jason and the Olympians, again, our real goal is just to get the book printed, just to get it printed and paper shipping and get it out. That's if we never make a dime, that's okay. I know it's going to make a lot of people happy, and I've got my story out there, and that's a wonderful thing. Now, am I against making money? No, I am not.
I'm not against it either.
But that's all I can speak to is my own passion, my own way of looking at this particular project, and that's where it lies. You know, I could not tell Jason and the Olympians. So,
and then even going in further into Kickstarter, because I am super curious, because obviously my field about indie comics, and I'm actually curious. I'm going to ask you this actually first. Is that I find indie comics to be way more interesting right now than anything that DC is putting out, you know, anything Marvel's putting out, anything that Image is putting out, and that I feel that indie comics are killing it right now. And obviously, I'm curious where you feel indie comics are, because I think that this is like the first time where I'm more interested in everything that's on Kickstarter and every story, because these are all the stories that couldn't be picked up by DC or Marvel or Image. And it's a very weird time because we're almost in a golden age of indie comics as far as storytelling. Obviously, as a comic book investor and on that side, I'm very, very confused because it's very tricky figuring out what's going to be the next big thing that's going to be worth, 10 grand in 10 years on the indie front, because there's so much out there. But as far as storytelling, I feel like indie comics are killing it right now. And I'm just curious how you view indie comics and where you think they're going with that as far as stories and even what's being put out there, and even just the development of the comic medium, because it is very interesting what's happened in the last 2 years.
I think it may be even more beyond that. And it may just be what's the time a person is in their life. I mean, 15-year-old me is a Marvel DC diehard. But now, unabashedly, like Brubaker and Phillips are my jam. That's what I'm reading. It's not Kickstarter, but it's not one of the big two. So I look for good stories. I think, but I mean, you could, and do I regularly buy DC or Marvel now? I don't. They have some incredible art. And I've and I hear good things about these stories, and I pick it up, and I'm not bashing anyone, not bashing any writers. They're just serving different. They have different goals. I think I know, like I mentioned, Brubaker and Phillips. I know they want to make money. Absolutely, they do this for a living. But you read that book, they've got a story they want to tell, and a damn fine one. DC and Marvel arguably are making Big Macs, 1,000 served every day or whatever. And there's not a thing wrong with that in my book. They just have organizations that have different goals. I love to sink my teeth into a story, but I mean, and so I'm not hypocritical.
Do you feel, because the way I feel is I feel like DC, Marvel, and even a little bit of Image has become very corporate, meaning they know certain stories, Batman, 121, if they follow a certain script and a certain pathology with it for 6 issues, they know they're going to sell a certain amount of books, a certain amount of money. And look, there's nothing wrong with that, and it's a solid story. But with indie, I feel like somebody says, hey, I know everybody loves this character in issue 1. I'm going to kill him off in issue 2, and he's not coming back. And I want to shock my reader so they say, what just happened, and who's going to fill that spot? And there's more risk that can be taken because your fans are buying your story now. First thing, and so there's a lot more creative control where you don't have to follow the corporate structure script that has been developed. And there's nothing wrong. I enjoy Scott Snyder's Batman for the first 50 issues. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thought it was great writing. But, I also think that, I don't think it's the complete script Scott would have wanted to write. I mean, come on. You're telling me that Bruce Wayne didn't want to kill a bunch of those Court of the Owl characters? Of course he did. Who wouldn't? They're in his freaking building in the 13th floor in between. If somebody was living in my building in a crawl space, I would want to kill them, and I'm not Batman. So clearly, so that this is why I feel like indie is killing it. And I'm just curious, because they could take those risks. And even when we look at, Phillips and Brubaker, they're working for Image, and they could take those risks too. And I feel like it's a real change of the guard.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in agreement here. I don't think we have a disagreement. I don't think it's
we could have a disagreement. I'm fine with it if you would like.
No,
I'm kidding.
We'll see. I think, I think what we do agree, probably would disagree on is that, I mean, and it's probably just semantics. It's probably no real disagreement.
Yeah, it's probably semantics.
You talked as if it was a recent development. I mean, DC Comics is a division of Warner Brothers, which in turn is a division of another company, of another and another.
So I don't think it's a recent development. I think the recent development is the indie side is sort
Oh,
of
okay. Yeah, I just misheard you. See, I thought that was.
so I think the corporate structure has always been there for the last 30 years in DC, give or take, maybe even longer. I feel like
Marvel too. I mean, they're hardcore under Disney now, which is a major company, a major business, and so on and so forth. So
the way I view it is I feel like Indies has basically said, hey, there's a huge opportunity for us to unwind this and actually tell people the stories we want to tell. And so I think that's what it is, and that's what I think your book does in a lot of ways, is that where right from the start we get your main character's mom gets killed, sacrificing. Who does that in a comic? I mean, Batman hasn't started out that way. We didn't get Bruce Wayne's origin story until issue 300 of Batman. We didn't get those background stuff. But imagine if Batman started out that way.
Yeah.
So,
well, I appreciate that. I thank you. I wish in all modesty, we're serving a monomyth, and we wanted to set up immediate action sequence, and sacrifice happens in life. It's what makes often sacrifice is noble and heartbreaking, but often it's for the greater good.
It's these books are real, meaning that's the other thing I think that's also really interesting about indie right now, is that there's real consequences for this stuff, where when we look at other things, and I think this is what people are feeling in society, and I know I'm feeling, is that I want a book where there's real consequence. And so if I have a 18 issue series, I want real consequences that occur in those books. I don't want issue 6 everything resets again. I think that's the other thing that's going on too, where clearly, and I don't know how far we're going to go into the arc 2 and 3, but there's going to be real consequences that occur going on in your book, and that's something that people are gravitating towards.
Absolutely, 100%. There will be, and those will reveal themselves. And
I'm not going to push you, I promise.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil anything, but
and so obviously I want to.
But you're right. I do want to agree. Mainstream comics, the big two, what that journey is you take the character who begins at status quo as far away from status quo, which I cannot get the finger thing down in this video. I'm an old man, Andrew.
Believe me, I mess up when I'm pointing to my logo. It's over here, and no, I'm the worst.
But you take that character as far away from status quo as possible, but we all know by the end of this storyline that character will be back at status quo, because it's a weekly thing. I mean, a monthly thing, and it's a decade thing. It's a generational thing, and I don't know that that's wrong.
I don't think it's wrong. I just think people are just sick of it. That's what I think. Yeah. And I think people want different, and that's what I think. So speaking about status quo, and this is a great segue into this, and I'm super curious. And obviously, cons are a mess. Now, I don't know where you're from exactly in the U.S.
Chattanooga, Tennessee. Cheers to
you. So you're sort of in the middle of the country, I think is a fair statement.
Yep.
Is Fedex in Kentucky or Tennessee?
They're all over, buddy.
No, I mean their headquarters.
Their headquarters? It's not. I don't think it's in Tennessee. We do have major terminals, but they have major terminals. My cousin, who's my age, is actually works for FedEx higher up, and he's out of West Palm Beach, Florida. So.
No. The reason why is that FedEx is centered. It's an aside, but it's a really cool aside. FedEx is centered in one of the Midwest states as their major hub, where everything goes through that hub, and it's next to a small airport, and the FedEx airport is bigger. It's 3 times the size of the smaller airport, and everything goes through, and that's where they can get everything within 3 days. It's one of the most insane operations in the world, and it is amazing. The reason why I asked this question is it's a total aside. I was just curious because it gives context to what I'm going to ask. So
We are
obviously,
about, I'm about, just to give you context, we are about 2 hours or about an hour and a half above Atlanta, which is, we're all, speaking of Marvel, all the Marvel films and everything else gets filmed now, but it's also just a major hub for the country. It's a midway point. So, yeah.
yeah, the reason why I bring this up, and that actually gives me even more context, is that obviously I'm in Connecticut, so I'm on the East Coast. About 9 months ago, I lived in DC. So obviously, DC is a little bit different than the New England, Connecticut. I'm by Danbury, if that gives anybody context. But one of the things is that obviously New York City is taking extreme measures against COVID right now. New York Comic Con is up in the air. I think it's a safe assumption at this point because we don't know what it's going to look like. They say they're going onward, but we've seen how that worked for the last 21 months, I would say. And so where do you see COVID going and conventions going? Because different parts in the country have different reactions to all of this, and every state is handling it differently because every state is having a different level of COVID, and every state has also experienced a different thing. Where in New York, it was a lot worse, and so New York is taking a very extreme measure, while something like Kentucky or Tennessee might have a different response because every state is different. So how have you been affected by cons, and where do you see it going? Because obviously it's very complicated right now.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody should get vaccinated personally, just to protect. My son just went back to school, and he's just not old enough yet to be vaccinated. So I desperately live in fear now, thanks to the Delta variant. They did, thank God, start mandating masks as of this past Monday, but they were in school for a full 2 days. And beforehand, and immediately, in this first week, it's not even been a full week. Already 500 kids have gone into quarantine. This is bad stuff. I mean, talk about circling the wagons for the greater good. I understand it sucks for personal liberties, and I'm tired of it too. But if we want to get back to normalcy, you know, and keep people from dying, because now in Tennessee, or in Chattanooga at least, I know we've got more people in the hospital now than we had throughout the first wave. Unfortunately, here in the Southeast and in other parts, the attitude is not. I mean, it's not very. It is not in line. I'm not the normal attitude in that regard.
So how do you feel about where cons are going? Because obviously, I think it was the right decision for a bunch of cons not to run for the last 21 months. Because let's be realistic here. And I mean, I think you've done a few cons, right?
Yeah, I've done several throughout my time as a writer. Yeah.
And so obviously I know, and I've done a bunch, I was presenting anime and Comic Cons as a fan panelist, and I've done 50 panels. I've probably attended about 25 cons, and I've never caught con crud, but we all know cons were never ever safe. They obviously were a lot safer when we didn't have COVID, I think is a safe assumption. But if somebody has the flu, if you have 20,000 people around, people are going to get the flu. It's just statistics. And COVID is obviously highly more contagious. So where do you think we're going with this? Because obviously, are we going to see cons being shut down again? That are the remainder? Are we going to see cons being fearful? Because I'm looking at New York Comic Con and I'm like, I'm not touching New York Comic Con. You couldn't pay me to go to New York Comic Con. Yeah. If you wrote me a check for $10K, I would turn it down. I have no desire. And $10,000 is a lot of money. I mean, it's that idea where I'm saying to myself, like, I don't want to be around 100,000 people. And even if you are vaccinated, statistically, a bunch of people are going to get it at New York Comic Con. No question about it. Even if everybody is vaccinated, it's going to happen, and it's going to be bad.
Yeah, I mean, I'm afraid you may be right. And I mean, even the Delta variant, which is out now, I mean, I've been vaccinated, but I have no illusions that I am free and unable to catch it. Apparently I can now. And
you can. So somebody close to me, I said this before, somebody close to me just got COVID, and my mom was in association with them, and my mom tested negative for COVID. And then so she doesn't have it. She did 2 COVID tests and she's out of the clear. So either her antibodies are fighting it, and this person was vaccinated. So obviously nobody is immune to this second variant or whatever, third variant or COVID-22, whatever it's called. And I had been vaccinated and I don't go anywhere until this thing is calmed down because I don't want to get COVID. I would prefer not to. And
yeah, I mean, it's not that. I mean, it's not, Andrew, you know, we can, I'm sure viewers and listeners have heard this out the woods. I think it's about taking reasonable precautions, and it's thinking about those who are immunocompromised, because, you know, like my mother, for example, is elderly. She has a piece of her lung missing. I cannot catch COVID and give it to her. I can't take that chance. So for those people, and now the Delta's doing this, you know, just to finally answer your question, and I'm sure your watchers want us to move on. Unless we can do it in a safe fashion, I'm sure cons are going to get suspended again. The good news is, and my local shops tell me, people have, well, the silver lining, it sucks. But the good news is, you know, my shops locally have thrived throughout the pandemic because people are tired of binging the same old TV shows and watching the same old crap and playing the same old games. They've turned to comics, and they've found the wonderland that has always been their way.
It goes even further. I don't know if you know this statistic, but comic shops really had the ability to do something they never got to do before. And when you go into a comic shop, they have bins and bins and bins and bins of back issues. Yeah. And because Diamond and Marvel and DC all shut down, a lot of these comic shops had the ability to actually sell like 30 to 40% of their back stock. And that was a huge relief, because when you have back stock, it's carrying debt. And I know this because my business is built on this entire backbone. And I'm doing it at a small level. If you have $50,000 of back issues and you move through 30 grand of that, that's a huge sell-through point. And so it's very, very interesting where comic shops have gotten the ability to actually survive, and not only survive, but thrive in the middle of a very bad circumstance. And it was much needed. And I think, you know, without cons, you know, and obviously I want to go back to cons to some degree as well, but it was very healthy, I think. You know, obviously nobody wanted this, I think is a safe assumption, but this is something that's very important to the industry. And you talk about lifelines and, you know, the blood of the industry. A comic shop only having 40% of their backlog and having the problem saying, where the hell am I going to get backlog, is a great problem. And it might allow a bunch of shops to actually stay open. And so it's super. And then it also opens the door for indie, because now they need new content because they don't have as much stock. And there you go. And it's a very important thing that's occurred. And so obviously that's something that is super cool in that regard.
Absolutely. I like the way you think, Andrew. I think you're hitting the nail on the head, buddy.
I'm part of the great digitalization pivot. You know, it's also the fact that I love the fact that online presence, you know, this entire show, if I didn't already said, I probably said in my last interview, this entire thing came out of the fact that I was so backlogged in my other show that I had to do something when everybody was home and a bunch of indie comic creators, cosplayers, and wrestlers weren't getting bookings. In 2020, I did 90 interviews. This year, I'm on track to do 180.
Nice.
And it's very important, where all of a sudden a lot of the people I'm interviewing weren't going to cons. And I'm part of the great digitalization pivot, where this is a digital pivot. And it's now more important than ever to have a digital footprint, no matter what you're doing, even if it's small. You know, small digital footprints matter. And it's super, super important at this point. And I think, you know, I'm curious how you feel about that, where you think that's going in the future, because I think, you know, digital, you know, growing your digital side of things is beyond important. You know, obviously Facebook groups, member groups, you know, pages, all that stuff, I think is not going to go away once things return back to normal, nor should they.
Yeah, it'll probably change form just because technology will. You know, there was Lord, I can't even remember of it. Before Facebook, there was MySpace, and so on and so forth.
The good days. The days when the internet made sense, the days where, a cat video,
Right.
you 3 of them out there. The good
So,
days.
yeah, but I think humans are always going to crave. If the pandemic's going to taught us anything, not to get back off on the pandemic, we crave that interaction, and we love face to face. But if we can't have it, and even if we can, thank you, Andrew, and all your contemporaries. Do what, bud?
This is the new face to face.
Yeah. So thank you so much for giving us this platform. In the absence of con, in the absence of being able to do comic shop tours and all the above and more, giving us this platform to talk about our comics, the things we love, the pop culture, the wrestling, everything, buddy. I can't thank you enough, man.
And then obviously, I don't want to spend too much time going down this rabbit hole. I think we've beaten it enough, and I think
I'm gonna have to.
Point here.
I'm gonna have to get out of here in a minute, buddy.
There's so much to talk about with your book, and you got a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, I am not as familiar with your other projects, which means I'm gonna have to go check them out, and definitely more the comic side, because I'm just not interested in reading a whole novel right now. I got enough books in my backlog to read as far as that. Reading books.
Yeah, let me tell you, Andrew, along with Jason and the Olympians, right on Macroverse, which is a digital platform. I'll get it here in a second. Yeah, Sherwood, Texas. It's a reimagining of the Robin Hood legend as a biker gang epic. I have an original project coming out with Macroverse called The Top Secret Service. Imagine a world where governments engage in esoteric mystical warfare. It's James Bond meets Doctor Strange. And then on top of that, coming out from Scout Comics, I've got a book with artist Hoyt Silva called Comic Books Kill. And it uses the springboard as the long hush hush rumor that Golden Age Comics served as a front for the mafia to tell a story where Golden Age Comics creator Jack Levi gets into a secret love affair with a socialite Harlem mistress and his mob boss benefactor. And so sparks fly. He places his life and career on the line.
And then obviously, I was about to ask you, and you sort of read right into my question where, obviously this is the self-promotion part of the show. And so you started it without me asking, which is perfect because it just leads me right into segue where you got a bunch of projects going on. Obviously you have the novel, you got, a bunch of other stuff going on. You got obviously the Scout thing with Golden Age Comics, Comic Books Kills, and a variety of other things coming out and that have been out. And even going further than that, where can people find you on social media? So where are all your projects? What are your projects that you already haven't mentioned? And then where can people find you on social media? Facebook pages, websites. Obviously, the Kickstarter is a big one. I think I put the link up above. I'm probably going to modify the link to be the short link for those to make it easier for everybody out there. But obviously, if you're on YouTube, in the Facebook group, obviously on the page, the link's up there. And so where can people find everything that you're doing and buy all your stuff?
Yeah. Well, right now, no purchase required at Line Webtoons. I've got a web comic with artist Mike Salter. It's called The Amazing Grace. That's over on Line Webtoon. The Amazing Grace, 1981. Grace Jackson and her fellow sister knights travel the globe fighting supernatural evil while they try to unravel the mystery of Grace's past. A warrior for truth, friendship, and love, she is the Amazing Grace. So check her out. Free, no charge. That's a thank you to readers and followers. And as we mentioned, we've got Comic Books Kill coming with Scout, with Macroverse. We have the Top Secret Service coming. On Facebook, it's Shane Berryhill, writer. That's my writer page. The best place is Instagram, and that's, of course, at all one word, Shane Berryhill, at Shane Berryhill 1, at Shane Berryhill, the number 1. But the big mama jamma, the hostess with the mostest, the lady of the hour, who I love, I'm excited about. I hope you are too, Andrew. I hope your watchers and listeners will be. It's Jason and the Olympians. Jason is short for Jacinta. She's Japanese and Portuguese mixed heritage. And you can find that and back that Kickstarter at Jason, JACIN.info. JACIN.info.
And then obviously, I've been saying this, you have to support indie comics. And what that means is that you have to back Kickstarters. And whether you're backing it digitally, physically, you're picking up a big package, a small package, or, you're just throwing a few dollars, a little bit goes a long way, and every dollar matters, because you don't know how $5 goes a long way. Because if, your goal is like 4,000. I don't know the math, but if you divide 5 by 4,000, it doesn't take that many backers to cross a goal here. And also, when people start seeing things getting backed, more people just naturally get attracted to it, and it becomes very much a chain. And even going further off of that, if let's say this Kickstarter isn't your jam, but something else is, well, what is that's something to also pay attention, where not every Kickstarter, every comic somebody does is their thing, but you might love an author and a different project they've done, and buying that book is also a way to support them, and reading that book, because you might be like Comic Kills, you might be like, oh man, that sounds awesome, that's right up my alley because I love mobsters and comics, and there you go. So being well aware, and email lists and just following people's social media goes a huge amount. It goes a long way, because now you're notified when that comes out. So obviously, that's the other thing that you need to do as well, is follow people on social media, follow their Instagram, actually engage on their Instagram, like their Instagram posts, like their Facebook pages, and check out what they're doing, and also share projects, because a share can go a long way. Because, if I throw something up and it's a quick story, somebody shared an interview I did with somebody, and because they shared it, 5 people while the interview was going on backed the project. And it might seem like, oh, only 5 people backed it, but if each of those 5 people spend $20, well, that's $100, and maybe that $100 made the difference between their project being funded and not funded. Or maybe, and so it goes a long way when you share things out there, and obviously you never know who's watching. And since we're talking about that, I got a buy me a coffee link, guys, on this show. As of right now, is still fan supported, and it will be sponsor, no sponsor. So obviously that goes a long way too. Sharing this interview out makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside, and I like to feel loved and appreciated. So if you like it, share it, and if you have a few extra dollars, throw it that way. But obviously, first and foremost, if you have to pick between supporting this podcast and backing the Kickstarter, back the Kickstarter first.
Do both, people. You can do it. Get this man a coffee. How many shows have you done and you've got on track to do?
Got 180.
Man, if somebody needs a coffee, people,
and I'm going to say this right now. If I only get 178, I'm going to be furiously pissed off. Like, you're going to see me rant on like Facebook and all these groups, and it is going to be a huge essay-long rant of how angry I am. I was so angry in 2020. I got 90, and I don't think people understand. Most people are like, dude, you did 90 interviews. You did 90% of your goal of 100 in 2020, and you're angry about that? And I'm like, yes. And I was angry in June that I didn't do 110. I did 103, and I was furious because I like to surpass my goals. If I do 200, I'm going to be furious that my goal was only 180. Okay, so
you heard it, people. Don't make Andrew angry. You wouldn't like it.
That's where I stand on this. But anyway, having said all that, I'm going to give you the final word.
No, thank you. My final word, Andrew, is thank you, brother, so much for having me on, for boosting my signal. JACIN.info, Jason and the Olympians, a fun book. Thank you from the entire team. And I can't thank you enough. I hope all your watchers and listeners will buy this man a coffee, back his show, Pop Anime Comics. Awesome stuff. Thanks so much, everybody.
And I think on that note, I really can't argue with you on that because, well, that was all compliments to me. So I believe that is a wrap.